Just a couple comments here on vices. Now this is a big old palm grain vise. Notice that there's, and this is a 4-incher, pretty bad shape, but there's plenty of gap right here and here. This sliding piece does not touch the outside here, just the bottom. This one came from a school. Also notice that there's a little slop here. It's a little loose, but not too loose. Lautrec. You know what, I'm going to cut to a video right now, a real short video of when I was in New Orleans last year, and I was on Toulouse Street, so I took a picture of that. So let me cut to that right now. I know this is a bit irrelevant, but Toulouse-Lautrec, of course, was a French artist. But you knew that. I'm in New Orleans right now, and I often talk about Toulouse-Lautrec. So there it is. Okay, I'm back from that irrelevancy, but you know, Eli Whitney would be mad at me for varying somewhat from the dimensions on this, because it was all about interchangeable parts, and it certainly is in a factory. But I was so used to working in a school with the kids where every dimension was off and we had to make one part fit the other. Therefore, that's a bit what I'm doing here, is making the jaw to fit the slot, even though it might vary just a few thousandths from the drawing. And I have milled this off now, and there's very little play there right now. And I am indeed finally ready to drill and tap this hole. And I'm going to go through the vise part and into the jaw, and that calls for, let's see where that dimension is as far as the depth. That's not it there. Where is that dimension? Alright, the bottom of this hole actually is 500 thousandths. That is, it's a 1/2 inch deep hole, and it's a 1/4 inch hole. Pencil in extra dimensions if you need them on your drawing. It is a working drawing which you'll be throwing away. So sometimes you got to do a little calculating from the drawing. And so there's my 1/4 inch bit, and I will be going, when I drill, clear through and halfway through, that is 1/2 inch into the movable jaw. That's with a 1/4 inch bit. Then I will back this away and change drill bits, and that's going to be a letter I bit just through this piece, and then tap to 5/16 24. That's a National Fine, Unified National Fine. Into this piece. I'll also tap that when I am in the vise. So you got to have that straight. Now if you don't have a 5/16 24 tap fine, and you're not in the mood for buying one, you can get away with a coarse. I just prefer a fine on a small vise like this. I'm going to drill and tap on the Bridgeport mill. You may be doing it on a drill press. If you are doing it on a drill press, several different ways of holding it. One is with an angle plate. And if you use an angle plate, be sure and square it up this way. Just in case the end is not square, or double check that this is square. In other words, that you get the hole straight, perpendicular, and all that good stuff. So when you drill this, you're going to need several clamps. One to hold the vise right here about where my thumb is, and then another one to hold it right here and make sure that the vise jaw does not move as you're drilling it or get pushed away from the pressure on that drill bit. Let's take a look at another way of holding it. You can hold it in a smaller drill press vise like this and make sure that you put the back side of or the bottom of the vise up against the fixed jaw, not the reversed way. And notice that I've got a heavy-duty C-clamp on there now. Here's another possibility for holding it, and this is a 2.5-inch vise, so notice that this doesn't come quite down to the bottom, but it's resting on this jaw here, so the C-clamp would be unnecessary. However, you would have to then unclamp it in order to drop the jaw. So that probably wouldn't be a real good method. And you want to have your vise, if you're doing this on the drill press, clamped down, not just floating around. By the way, in the previous few clips I actually had this thing upside down. This is the side I'm going to be drilling from, but for illustrative purposes it doesn't matter, so ignore that. Don't make a comment. So here's another way, putting it in this heavy-duty vise, which is pretty beat up. I don't know if I would trust it for that type of thing, but again, that can be clamped like that for the initial hole. In other words, drill the 1/4-inch hole all the way into that, then take the clamp off and drill and tap. Again, this would have to be clamped onto the drill press table. Alright, I'm going to do it on the Bridgeport, so let's take a walk over to the BP. I'm finally ready to drill and tap, and this may be one of the single most important operations in the whole vise, because you could really screw this up. So I'm held up against the fixed jaw, I've clamped the movable jaw, and I have double checked this with a square, and when you a precision square, and when you use a square you might come back here with a light or hold a piece of white paper back there and see if you see any light coming through. That's just a suggestion, and I got to double check that again before I clamp down. I'm not fully clamped yet, and I have chosen my weapons here: a starter bit, a 1/4-inch bit, the letter I bit, and the 5/16 24, and that is indeed a tapered tap, but you can get by with a plug tap. And here's my 1/2-inch edge finder, and even though this has been laid out carefully a long time ago, and many of you will be using the layout rather than an edge finder, but I'm going to use the edge finder, and it'll be 1/2 inch over, that is in the x-axis, and 3/8 in the y-axis. For those of you that are super observant, and I think that's most of you, you noticed, and as I reviewed the videotape here from that last clip with the flashlight, I could see light coming through there, so I have re-squared this up and now tightened the vise. Ready to locate it now. As I'm taping this, I'm using a monitor, and sometimes when I go back and review the tape or just look over at the monitor, I can see things greatly enlarged on the monitor. And with my 73-year-old eyes, it shows up much better in the monitor than me looking directly at it. Well, that's just an aside, but okay, I'm going to run the edge finder up against this. Remember, the radius of this is 250, and I need to move in 500 thousandths, so it'll be 750, and I will be using the digital readout for that. Let's go. You see it slip, and now I'm reaching over and pushing the 0 here on the x-axis and moving 750. You can dial that in if you don't have a DRO. It can be pretty accurate, or very accurate, if you take the lost motion out of your screw. Okay, now I'll lock the x-axis. I'm on 750, and I will do the same thing with the y-axis, but I need to, let's see, 250 plus 375. What is that? Make sure there's no burrs when you use an edge finder. Slow down, tubalcain. See it slip? Again, I'm reaching over to the digital readout and zeroing out the y-axis and moving in 625. Lock the x-axis. I can turn this around now. You can see the reading there. And what I do now is to zero it out, because I will have to move the table to do some tool changes, and then I'll just move back to zero, and I can always find the home position. Is that clear as mud? This is a 1/4 inch starter bit, but you certainly can use a center drill if you're in the mood. Finally, I'm making chips instead of talking. Now I'll change tools to the 1/4 inch longer bit. I'm ready to drill the 1/4 inch hole clear into the movable jaw, so that's 3/4 of an inch plus half of that, which is another 1/2 inch, for a total of 1.25 inches deep that I'm going. So I've already brought the drill down close to the work. Now there's several ways of doing this, probably 20 ways. You can mark the drill bit, or you can raise the knee 1.250, or in this case I'm going to use the depth stop up here. And you recognize this bar, 1.25 inches? So I've set this stop for 1.25 inches. So I'll simply bring this down until this hits the blue stop. How about that? Alright, let's go. I could feel myself entering the other jaw at that point. Not the other jaw, the jaw. And I have a 1/2 inch more to go. And I'm on the blue stop. Out comes the 1/4. Now I can move that jaw out of the way, let it drop. And I'm going to put the letter I in. Excuse my hairy arm. And I don't need the depth stop now. Now I'm ready to tap. If you have the nerve and you have the blood, you can power tap it, but I'm not going to. This is one of those spring-loaded tap guides. Can you see that moving up and down or not? A nice Greenfield tap wrench. should show you that this particular tap has a center hole in it. Not all taps do. So this is a hand operation, and I'm going to exert pressure on this. In other words, that's all the way down. I'm locking the quill, putting a little cotton earl on. Again, this is a taper tap. Bring that down. Duh. Now if you're doing this in the bench vise, I would drill a clearance hole, a 5/16 clearance hole about 3/16 in there, and that would help guide it straight. Now don't break the tap off, because that will make a grown man weep. Since this is a taper tap, I'm running it down as far as I can go. Back it off, and I'm going to take it out. Let me tell you now, before you take it out, concentrate on what you've done here. Is everything done? Because you would never be able to set it back up again in the same position. And I've emphasized that in other videos and other parts of this video. So please make sure that you're done before you open the vise. If you don't have one of these, and I was looking for another center, that's not the one I wanted to show you, but that can be put up in a collet and also guide your tap. However, then you need 3 hands. So then you got to get your wife away from Wheel of Fortune. Now this is really the one I was looking for before. I forgot that I had this, I guess. Or, well, I guess I did know, but I had no idea where it was. But this has a much stronger spring. That's the one that I really wanted to use. You can make one of these too. That'd be a good project for a video.